Today we're traveling on the Appian Way, a road that dates back over 2,300 years and was the first Roman highway. Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. So normally we do videos on roadside attractions and roadside history in the United States. But right now I'm in Rome, Italy. And if you follow this channel for any amount of time, you know that I love to check out old roads. So there was no way I was going to visit Rome without visiting where we're going today. You've probably heard the expression, all roads lead to Rome. Well, today we're visiting the first Roman highway, Via Appia Antica, the Appian Way. The Appian Way historically began here at the Circus Maximus, which was an ancient Roman chariot racing stadium. This place actually predates the Republic of Rome, probably having been established about 2,800 years ago, and is said to have held up to 150,000 spectators. Now, the Appian Way isn't quite as old as the Circus Maximus, only dating back to 312 BC. The road was named for the censor Appius Claudius Caecus, who planned the first 132 miles of the road, leading from Rome to Capua. This was during the Second Samnite War, and the purpose of the road was to allow for Rome to more easily move its soldiers. Over the years, the road was expanded, and by 191 BC, it went all the way to Brindisi on the southeast coast of Italy, modern Brindisi. But I'll talk more about the history of the road and how this was really the first highway in just a bit. I mentioned that the Circus Maximus was the historic starting point, but now the road actually starts a little over a mile from here, and there's rain in the forecast, so let's get on the road before it gets here. As we'll probably explore the first 5 or so miles of the Appian Way, we rented e-bikes to get around. Riding bikes around Rome definitely takes some bravery, as there are a lot of narrow streets and a lot of cars. Fortunately, there isn't many cars right now, but I wasn't able to film a minute ago because I was so busy trying to stay alive. We aren't even really at the start of the Appian Way yet, and already this ride looks amazing. It's incredible to think that these walls are hundreds of years old, and that's young for some of the stuff we're going to see. We've made it to the start of the road. Well, I guess technically the start of the road is on the other side of the gate in front of us. But this thing here is called the Arch of Drusus, named after the stepson of Augustus Caesar, Nero Claudius Drusus. But it actually has nothing to do with him. It was misidentified at some point and the name stuck. Historians aren't actually 100% sure what the exact origins of this thing are. This gate is called Porta San Sebastiano, which is part of the Aurelian walls that surrounded Rome in ancient times. This was once actually named Porta Appia, but in the 1400s it was renamed for Saint Sebastian. The walls were originally constructed around 275 AD by the Emperor Aurelian. And what I think is an interesting side note is this parking area dates back to ancient times as well. Because transit of private means in Rome wasn't allowed, the rich could park their rides here to be ready for when they wanted to leave town. Okay, we have gone through the gate, and in ancient times would have left the city of Rome. Across the street is the first milestone on the Appian Way, where we get the word milestone from. I'll try to cross over and get a closer look, but the traffic here is pretty crazy right now. This designates that we are 1 Roman mile from the Golden Milestone, which was a monument made of gold that would have been in the Roman Forum that all distances in the Roman Empire were measured from. This milestone is a replica of the original that was placed here in 76 AD. For reference, a Roman mile was 1,000 paces, so a little bit shorter than a modern mile. We're now crossing over the Almone River, which is a small tributary of the Tiber River that was sacred in ancient times. Unfortunately, now it's severely polluted. This is called the Tomb of Cecilia, which is attributed to the son of Emperor Septimius Severus, who was killed by his brother in 212 AD. Here's one of the Roman water fountains. These can be found all throughout the city, and the water is safe to drink. Just a note as I dodge cars here, I don't speak Italian or Latin, so I do apologize if I butcher any pronunciations. Right ahead of us at this intersection, there should be a couple of very important religious sites, and I do see one on the left, but we'll start with the one on the right. Burials were forbidden in the city of Rome, so early Christians buried their dead underground in catacombs. There were millions of early Christians buried in miles of catacombs here, and San Callisto is one of the biggest. They do offer tours, and there are a lot of tour buses here right now, as you can see, but unfortunately they don't allow any filming inside. It is very interesting in there and definitely worth taking the tour. Here, a lot of the early popes were buried. From here at San Callisto, you can also look back and you get a pretty cool view of the top of the dome of St. Peter's Basilica at Vatican City. Right across the street from the entrance to the San Callisto Catacombs, this small, unassuming church is the Church of Domine Quo Vadis. It is said that it is built on the spot where the Apostle Peter, who was fleeing Rome, had an encounter with Jesus. Peter asked him, "Domine Quo Vadis?" or "Lord, where are you going?" And Jesus replied, "I'm going to Rome to be crucified again." And that convinced Peter to accept his fate, and he returned to Rome, where he was crucified upside down. Like modern road stops wanting to attract visitors, churches would often have relics to attract pilgrims. Here at the Church of Domine Quo Vadis, they have a stone that is said to have Jesus' footprints in it from when he appeared to Peter. There are quite a few cars on the road today, and this road is not very wide. When it was originally built, it was built wide enough so that two carts could pass each other. It looks like this has definitely been widened at some point since then. I mentioned this was the first Roman highway. Eventually 29 highways like this branched out from Rome. This church was built in the 17th century, but underneath it are the San Sebastiano Catacombs. The word catacomb actually comes from here, as it is the Latinization of a Greek word, catacombus, which means under the cavity, referencing a depression in the terrain near here. This huge villa was built between 306 and 312 AD by the Emperor Maxentius. In this one complex, he had his palace, his circus, and his family mausoleum. We could kind of see how much land Maxentius' villa was on by just driving down the road a little bit further. This villa is just completely on the left side of us. It's covered by trees right now and can't really see it, but it just goes on and on forever. I think we could take a look through this gate here and get another look at just how big this property is. Maxentius was the last emperor to permanently live in Rome, and he famously drowned at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge when his forces were defeated by Constantine's. I don't believe he was ever buried in the huge mausoleum he had built here, as his body was taken to Africa. We've reached the tomb of Chilimatella, who was related to two wealthy and powerful Roman families. And you could tell these families were wealthy because this tomb is massive. This tomb was built somewhere between 30 and 10 BC, and it's so well preserved because in the 14th century, it was turned into a fortress. The condition of this tomb is really amazing, especially considering that it's over 2,000 years old. But let's go take a look at the inside. Here's the entrance to the tomb itself. Now this was built on a high point for the road in the area, so not only are we on the highest point of the Appian Way in the area, but we also have this massive tomb on top of it. Here's looking down in the tomb. And here's looking up. And attached to the tomb are the remains of the castle built in the 14th century. So we're back on the road, and you may have noticed these paving stones. This isn't what the road would have looked like in ancient times. This here is more like the road would have looked in ancient times. And not a good idea to ride the bike on these stones. Hold on a second, I gotta move over here. So this is more representative of how the road would have looked had you been on it a couple thousand years ago. And you can see it's a lot narrower here than it was earlier when I mentioned that it was built large enough for 2 carts to go by. It's hard to believe we're actually still in the city of Rome right now. So we've kind of gotten to a point on the road where there are blocks or ruins or something else to see pretty much every 10 feet. It's incredible how much history there is on this road. That sign says that's an Italian military base over there, but as you can see on the other side of the fence, there's still more ruins. This is said to be the tomb of M. Servilius Quartus. There's so much stuff along the road right now, the guidebook doesn't even list everything. Riding on the paving stones is way too rough at this point, so we're having to ride on the side of the road. There are so many tombs along the road because it was sort of a status symbol to have one. What better way to show how rich and powerful you were than by having a tomb along the highway to let everyone passing by know? Traveling down this road is like stepping back in time. It's just incredible. And it's so uncrowded compared to the rest of Rome. I mean, going to the Vatican and the Colosseum are great, but they're so packed with people. And here there's no one, and everywhere you turn your head, there's just more and more to see. This is amazing. So to give a little more history on the Appian Way as we pass by more ruins and tombs, in 73 BC there was a slave revolt in Rome led by Spartacus, and after Spartacus's army was eventually defeated, the Romans judged that all the slaves had forfeited their rights to live, so 6,000 of them were crucified along the 120-mile stretch of the Appian Way between Capua and Rome to send a message to any future uprisings. So had we been traveling on this road in 71 BC, as far as we can see in front of us, there would be a line of crucified slaves. I should point out, not only was this an ancient, important road, but it's still very much in use today. As we travel along, not only are we passing a lot of ruins, but we're coming across a number of modern homes as well, like one right over here. Romans like their roads straight whenever possible. So whenever there's a bend in the road, like up ahead, there's a reason for it. The bend here is to go around this tomb. It's said that in the 7th century BC, Rome and another city went to war, and to avoid bloodshed, both cities sent their champions to battle. 3 brothers from each city were sent, and in the end, 1 Roman survived, winning the war. This was thought to be the tombs of the champions, so out of respect, the road curved around it. Taking a look off to the side of the road here is this big open field. I can't imagine this looks much different than it would have 2,000 years ago. Speaking of taking a step back in time, all of a sudden we're in the middle of a herd of sheep and goats here. I definitely never expected to be in the middle of a goat herd when visiting the city of Rome. This unknown person's tomb was originally shaped like a pyramid, and my wife is making a rare appearance just so I could show how massive it was. We've made it to about the 5th mile of the Appian Way, and just up ahead is the Villa of the Quintili. This is one of the largest and most important ancient villas of the Roman countryside. This villa was owned by the Quintili brothers in the 2nd century AD, who were celebrated for their nobility and wealth. But when you're rich and have a large property, you're bound to make some people jealous, and in 182 AD, the Emperor Commodus had them killed and took their land. He then made it part of the imperial state property.
So the rain is really starting to fall now, and as you could probably tell, I did not prepare for rain. But still, we're gonna head a few more miles down the Appian Way, and I believe there are some aqueducts down here, so let's keep heading down. And there is so much history along this road. It's just like a history overload. Just every few feet there's ruins or some sort of monument or some statue or something. It is just insane how much there is to see.
Here is another tomb called Casal Rotundo, which dates to the 1st century BC. It was turned into a watchtower during medieval times, and now it looks like there's a private home on top of it. Obviously, this video is just a briefish overview of the road. There is so much to see on it. If we stopped at everything or went in depth on some of the history, it would take days just to go a few miles. We've gone about 6 miles so far, and I can't believe how much we've seen. This is called the Flint Tower, and it was built as a watchtower in the 12th century on top of a Roman tomb using materials recovered from some of the Roman ruins in the area. The tomb underneath the tower would have probably been around the same size as the tomb of Chilimatella, which we saw earlier, if we came by here in Roman times.
Okay, so according to this map right here, there should be some aqueducts here. Now I've looked around and I don't see any aqueducts. Now I know I promised them earlier, so we're gonna keep heading down the road and see if we can find something else cool instead. Now this is the end of the map, so I don't know what's down there, but we'll head down and find out. And in case anyone's wondering and they want to do this trip on their own, I highly recommend it. It definitely gets away from the crowds of Rome. I mean, we haven't seen another person in probably 20, 25 minutes. We're out here by ourselves, just just ruins after ruins, something 500 years old, 2,000 years old. But we rented these bikes right at the Circus Maximus. I'm pulling out the business card right here. This isn't sponsored or anything. They don't know that I'm mentioning this, but we got it from a place called Easy Bike Rent. Super friendly, great service. It was €35 per bike for the day. So highly recommend Easy Bike Rent, right next to the Circus Maximus. But anyways, let's jump on the road and keep heading down the Appian Way. It really feels like we're in the countryside here, even though we're still firmly in the city of Rome. This part of the Appian Way has been preserved as a park, and the further we travel on it, the less people we've seen. We have seen a few cars on the road though, and as crazy as it seems for how narrow the road is, they've been traveling both ways. I'm not sure what happens if two cars need to pass each other. We've gone about 7 miles now, so in ancient times we would be well outside the city of Rome, but we're still seeing plenty of remnants of the Roman Empire. It's also incredible to think of who may have traveled this road in its 2,300 years. I mean, we are riding bikes on the same road that historic figures like Julius Caesar would have traveled on. This is called the Temple of Hercules, but according to a sign here, it wasn't actually a Temple of Hercules, but it is the ruins of an emporium. Kind of an ancient version of a Stuckey's. I guess even travelers 2,000 years ago needed a roadside stop now and then. So from the Temple of Hercules here, the road continues on for a few hundred more miles, but this is where we're going to turn around and end our journey on the Appian Way before it gets too late and we get charged for another day of these e-bikes. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.